My name is Melissa Harper, and at 38, I thought I understood what betrayal meant until last Tuesday. Standing in the doorway of my second home in Portland, keys still in hand, I stared in disbelief at my younger sister Amber lounging on my couch, surrounded by toys, children's clothes, and 3 kids I barely recognized. "Surprise," she said with a nervous laugh that didn't reach her eyes. The house I'd inherited from our grandmother, the one I'd been carefully renovating to rent out to cover my mounting medical bills, had somehow become her family's residence without my knowledge or permission. If you're watching this and have ever felt that pit in your stomach when family betrays your trust, I know exactly how you feel. This story is going to take you through one of the most painful periods of my life, but also how I finally stood up for myself. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and if you've ever had to deal with family taking advantage of you, don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear more family drama stories like mine. Trust me, this one has twists you won't believe. I need to take you back to understand how this all started. Amber and I used to be close as kids. We shared a bedroom with bunk beds in our childhood home in Seattle until I was 16 and she was 12. We'd stay up late whispering secrets and making plans for our futures, but our parents' divorce when I was 17 changed everything. Mom took Amber to live with her while I stayed with Dad, mostly because I was almost ready for college. The physical distance created an emotional one too. Over the years, we drifted further apart. I pursued a career in financial consulting, built a stable life for myself, and maintained occasional contact with Amber through family gatherings and holiday cards. She became an elementary school teacher, married a guy named Ryan, and had 3 kids, Lily, Jacob, and Emily, now 10, 7, and 4. 2 years ago, our grandmother Eleanor passed away. She'd always been closer to me, something that created tension in our family. In her will, she left me her Portland house, a charming 1,920 Craftsman about 2 hours from where I lived. Grandma Eleanor had been clear in her will that the property was mine alone, not to be shared with siblings. My mother and Amber were upset by this, but the will was ironclad. The house meant a lot to me, filled with childhood memories of summers spent with Grandma. But with my health issues developing about a year ago, I realized the property could help financially. I'd been diagnosed with an autoimmune condition requiring expensive treatments not fully covered by insurance. The potential rental income from the Portland house could be a lifeline. I invested nearly $45,000 in renovations. New roof, updated plumbing, fresh paint, refinished hardwood floors, modern appliances in the kitchen. I even had a small apartment created in the detached garage with a separate entrance, thinking it could generate additional income. Every decision was made carefully to maximize rental potential. Because of my health treatments and demanding work schedule, I hadn't visited the property in about 5 months. The contractor had finished the work, sent me photos, and I'd been coordinating with a property management company to list it for rent. Last Tuesday was meant to be my final visit to take professional photos before listing. I noticed something was off the moment I pulled into the driveway. There was a blue minivan I didn't recognize parked there. A child's bicycle leaned against the front porch. The garden I'd paid to have professionally landscaped looked different, with colorful plastic toys scattered across the lawn. Confused, I approached the front door, thinking perhaps the contractor had allowed someone to move in early without telling me. I unlocked the door with my key and stepped inside, only to freeze in complete shock. The living room had been transformed. The minimalist, rental-ready space I'd created was now cluttered with children's toys, a large sectional sofa I didn't recognize, and family photos on the walls. And there, sitting on the couch with a cup of coffee, looking startled but not nearly surprised enough, was my sister Amber. "Melissa," she said, placing her mug down, "what are you doing here?" I stood there, keys still in hand, utterly speechless. 3 children appeared from different parts of the house at the sound of my voice. The oldest, Lily, looked at me with recognition but uncertainty. The younger 2 hid partially behind furniture, staring at me like an intruder. "What am I doing here?" I finally managed to say, my voice trembling with disbelief. "This is my house. The real question is, what are you doing here?" Amber's face shifted from surprise to something practiced, almost rehearsed. "Mom said it was okay for us to stay here temporarily," she said with a shrug that made my blood boil. "Just until we get back on our feet." I looked around at what was clearly not a temporary setup. They had completely moved in, rearranging and adding furniture, hanging pictures, filling the space with their belongings. This was no overnight stay or weekend visit. Mom doesn't own this house, I said slowly, trying to process what was happening. I do. Grandma left it to me, not Mom. Amber's expression hardened just slightly. Well, Mom gave us the key and said you wouldn't mind. You weren't using it anyway. That's when I noticed my niece Lily watching our exchange with wide eyes, clearly uncomfortable. Whatever was happening here, I didn't want to have this conversation in front of the children. But one thing was absolutely clear. Something was very wrong, and my sister was lying to my face. After asking the children to go play upstairs, I confronted Amber directly in the kitchen. How long have you been living here? I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. Just a couple of weeks, Amber said dismissively, rummaging through a cabinet that was now filled with her family's groceries. A couple of weeks? I repeated, noticing mail on the counter addressed to Amber Harper that was dated 3 months earlier. Then why do you have mail from January? Her casual demeanor faltered. Okay, maybe a little longer. What's the big deal? The house was just sitting empty. Mom said you wouldn't mind us using it while we sorted things out. Sorted what out? And why didn't anyone ask me directly? The betrayal stung even more because they deliberately kept me in the dark. Amber sighed dramatically, finally dropping the act. Ryan and I split up 6 months ago. The divorce was finalized last month. I lost my teaching job because I kept missing work dealing with all the custody hearings and paperwork. We couldn't afford our apartment anymore. While I felt sympathy for her situation, it didn't explain or excuse the deception. Why didn't you call me? Why go behind my back? Would you have said yes? She challenged, her voice taking on an edge. You've always been so rigid about your things. Mom said it would be easier to ask forgiveness than permission. I pulled out my phone and called our mother right then and there, putting her on speakerphone. Patricia answered on the 3rd ring, her voice cheerful until she heard why I was calling. Oh, Melissa, she said, her tone immediately defensive. I just gave Amber the spare key for a weekend visit. I had no idea she'd stay longer. The look that passed between Amber and me told me we both knew this was a lie. Mom had always favored Amber, especially after the divorce, but this level of deception was shocking even for her. The neighbor across the street says they've been here since early December, I said, having spoken briefly with an elderly woman named Nancy while getting my bearings outside. That's nearly 4 months, not a weekend. Well, what was I supposed to do? Mom snapped. Your sister has 3 children and nowhere to go. That house is just sitting there empty while you play landlord. Family should come first. I ended the call, too angry to continue the conversation. Turning back to Amber, I noticed she wouldn't meet my eyes. What else aren't you telling me? Over the next hour, more revelations came to light. Amber had been using my address to register the kids for school. She'd told all the neighbors she was the owner of the house. She'd been dating the man living in my garage apartment, a guy named Kevin I'd never even heard of, and worse, she'd been collecting $800 monthly rent from him for the past 3 months. You've been renting out my garage apartment? I was incredulous. That's literally theft, Amber. I needed the money, she said defensively. And it's not like you were using it. I walked through the house, noticing more and more things amiss. Grandmother's antique writing desk was missing from the study. The silver collection that had been carefully stored in the dining room cabinet was gone. Valuable items I'd specifically left in the house because they belonged there historically had vanished. Where's Grandma's silver service? I asked, opening the now empty cabinet. And her writing desk? Amber looked away. I had to sell some things to make ends meet. They were just gathering dust anyway. They weren't yours to sell. I exploded. Those were family heirlooms Grandma specifically left to me. Well, she should have left some things to me too, Amber shot back. Why should you get everything? Just because you were her favorite? The argument escalated from there. I discovered Amber had sold or pawned nearly $15,000 worth of antiques and heirlooms from the house. She'd been telling our extended family that I'd abandoned the property and that she was rescuing it from neglect. Even worse, she'd been bad-mouthing me to aunts, uncles, and cousins, painting herself as the victim of my selfishness. I found text messages on her phone when she left it on the counter to deal with her youngest daughter's tantrum. Messages between her and our mother, planning this takeover months ago, while I was undergoing a particularly difficult round of treatment for my condition. They'd deliberately chosen that time, knowing I would be too sick and distracted to check on the house. As the sun set that first day, I retreated to a hotel in downtown Portland, emotionally exhausted and betrayed, not just by my sister, but by my mother as well. The weight of their deception crushed me. This wasn't just about a house or possessions. It was about a lifetime pattern of Amber taking advantage of my generosity, while my mother enabled and encouraged her behavior. I sat in that hotel room, staring at the wall, wondering how I could have been so blind for so long and what I was going to do now. That night in the hotel, I couldn't sleep. Memories flooded back of all the times Amber had taken advantage of me, and how our mother had always supported her behavior. When Amber was 16 and crashed our father's car, I took the blame because she'd just gotten her license and was afraid Dad would take it away. When she needed money for college textbooks, I sent her $500 only to find out later she'd used it for a spring break trip to Cancun. When she was struggling financially during her first year of marriage, I lent her $12,000 to help with a down payment on their house. She never paid a penny back, always having some excuse about tight budgets and childcare costs. Our grandmother Eleanor had seen this pattern too. During my last visit before she passed away, she'd taken my hand and said, "Melissa, I'm leaving you the Portland house because you're the responsible one. You'll treasure it the way I have." She'd made her decision knowing exactly what she was doing, and the resentment this created had clearly festered in both my sister and my mother. The next morning, I returned to the house, determined to get more answers. I walked through each room, cataloging what was missing. It wasn't just Grandma's silver and writing desk. The antique mirror from the upstairs hallway, the vintage record collection, several valuable paintings, and even the handcrafted wooden jewelry box my grandfather had made for Eleanor on their 50th anniversary. All gone. While Amber was getting the kids ready for school, I managed to have a quiet conversation with Lily, her oldest daughter. The 10-year-old had always been particularly close to me, and I could see she was conflicted about what was happening. "Aunt Melissa," she whispered when we had a moment alone, "Mom told us you didn't want the house anymore. She said you told Grandma Patricia we could live here." My heart sank. "Lily, that's not true. I've been fixing this house up to rent it out because I need the money for my medical treatments. I never said anyone could live here." Confusion and hurt crossed her young face. "But Mom said you were rich and didn't need the money, and that family should share with family." I wanted to be careful not to turn Lily against her mother, but I also couldn't let the lies stand. "I'm not rich, sweetie. I work hard for everything I have. And while families should help each other, they should always be honest too." Lily nodded solemnly. "Mom told Kevin he could live in the garage if he gave her money every month. Is that true?" So even 10-year-old Lily knew about the rental scam. "No, honey, that wasn't okay for Mom to do." Later that day, I confronted Amber about the missing items. She initially tried to deny taking most of them, then shifted to claiming she'd only borrowed them, and finally admitted she'd sold them to make ends meet after her divorce. "You have no idea how hard it's been for me," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "Ryan left me for his secretary. He's been fighting me for custody even though he never cared about the kids before. I lost my teaching position because I kept having to leave for court dates and meetings with lawyers. What was I supposed to do?" "Call me," I said simply. "Ask for help directly instead of stealing from me." "Would you have helped?" she challenged. "You've got your perfect life with your perfect job. You wouldn't understand what it's like to struggle." I nearly laughed at the absurdity. Perfect life? "Amber, I've been undergoing chemotherapy and immunotherapy for the past year. My perfect job barely covers my medical expenses even with insurance. That's why I need to rent this house out." "But you never asked about my life, did you?" Her expression shifted, a momentary flicker of guilt quickly replaced by defensiveness. "Well," Mom said. "Stop hiding behind Mom," I interrupted. "You're 34 years old. You're responsible for your own choices." That evening, I discovered something even more disturbing. While searching for documentation of the missing items, I found papers in Amber's bedroom drawer about adverse possession laws in Oregon. She'd highlighted sections about occupying property openly for a certain period, and there were notes in the margins about establishing residency and tenant rights after 90 days. With growing horror, I realized this wasn't just an impulsive decision to crash at my house temporarily. This was a calculated plan to eventually claim legal ownership or establish squatters' rights. Amber and my mother had been playing a long game, hoping I wouldn't discover their scheme until it was too late. When I confronted Amber with these papers, she didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. "You have 2 houses," she said coldly. "I have none. Grandma should have split her assets fairly." "So this is revenge for Grandma's will?" I asked incredulously. "This is justice," she replied. "Mom agrees with me. If you were any kind of sister, you'd sign the house over to me. I have 3 children who need stability." I left the room before I could say something I'd regret. The depth of the betrayal was staggering. This wasn't just about a place to stay during hard times. This was a deliberate attempt to steal my inheritance, using my own family's financial difficulties to justify their actions. I spent that second night in the hotel again, unable to bear sleeping under the same roof with someone who had so thoroughly betrayed me. I called my friend Rachel, who lived in Seattle, and broke down completely while telling her everything. "Melissa," Rachel said firmly after listening to my tearful explanation, "this isn't just family drama. This is theft, fraud, and possibly criminal. You need to talk to a lawyer immediately." She was right, of course. The time for family discussions was over. I needed legal help to protect what was rightfully mine. The next morning, I researched attorneys in Portland who specialized in property disputes and family law. I found Diana Reynolds, a no-nonsense lawyer with excellent reviews who could see me that afternoon. Diana's office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, her credentials displayed tastefully on walls painted a calm sage green. She listened carefully as I explained the situation, occasionally making notes but mostly just letting me talk through the entire bizarre scenario. When I finished, she leaned forward. "Miss Harper, I want to be very clear. You have been the victim of fraud and theft. Your sister has no legal right to occupy your property without your permission, regardless of your family relationship. The items she sold without your consent constitute theft of property, and collecting rent from a tenant in your garage apartment is fraud." "What are my options?" I asked, relieved to finally have a professional perspective. "The cleanest solution is a formal eviction," she explained. "Oregon law requires giving tenants 30 days' notice, even for unauthorized occupants. Since there are children involved, courts tend to be more lenient about immediate removal. However, given the circumstances, particularly the theft of property and unauthorized rental of the garage apartment, we could potentially expedite this process." I couldn't help but imagine my nieces and nephew being forcibly removed from the house. Despite everything, I didn't want to traumatize the children. "What about the items she sold? And the rental income she collected?" "Those are separate issues," Diana explained. "You can file a civil suit for the value of the stolen items and the misappropriated rent. I would recommend documenting everything thoroughly, taking photos of the house in its current condition, and creating an inventory of missing items with approximate values." I walked out of Diana's office with a clear plan and formal eviction papers to be served. The weight on my shoulders felt marginally lighter having a professional in my corner. When I returned to my hotel, there was a voicemail from my mother. Her tone was cold and accusatory. "Melissa, Amber told me you're threatening to throw her and the children out on the street. I raised you better than that. Family should come before property. Your grandmother would be ashamed of how selfish you're being." I had to laugh bitterly at that last part. Grandma Eleanor had specifically left the house to me because she knew I would be responsible with it, and probably because she'd witnessed the same patterns of entitlement in Amber that I was dealing with now. Before responding to my mother, I called Rachel again for a reality check. Sometimes when you've been manipulated by family for so long, it's hard to trust your own judgment. "Am I being unreasonable?" I asked her after playing the voicemail. "Should I just let them stay?" "Absolutely not," Rachel responded instantly. "They stole from you, lied to you, tried to take legal possession of your property, and are now trying to manipulate you with guilt. Stand your ground, Melissa. This isn't about being mean to family. This is about stopping people who are actively harming you. If you've ever had to stand up to family who've taken advantage of you, you know how hard it can be. There's always that voice in your head wondering if you're overreacting or being selfish." In that moment, I needed my friend's perspective more than ever. If you've found yourself in a similar position, Let me know in the comments. Sometimes the validation from others is exactly what we need to trust our own instincts when family tries to gaslight us. While researching the legal situation further, I discovered something disturbing on Amber's social media. Despite claiming financial hardship, she'd posted photos 2 months earlier of a week-long trip to a luxury resort in Hawaii. The caption read, "Sometimes you just need to treat yourself. Divorce freedom, new chapter." This directly contradicted her story about being destitute after the divorce. Further digging revealed she'd received a substantial settlement from Ryan as part of their divorce agreement, something she'd completely failed to mention during our confrontations. I also decided to meet with the garage tenant, Kevin. He turned out to be a 30-something graphic designer who'd been dating Amber for about 5 months. He seemed genuinely surprised when I introduced myself as the actual owner of the property. "Amber told me she inherited this place from your grandmother," he said, looking confused. "She said you lived in Seattle and wanted nothing to do with the property. Did she tell you she was collecting rent illegally?" I asked. His expression darkened. "She said the rent was going into an account for house maintenance and property taxes." "Are you saying that wasn't true?" "I'm afraid not," I confirmed. "I've been paying the taxes and insurance on this property the whole time." Kevin ran a hand through his hair, clearly processing this new information. "Man, I had no idea. She told me you were this selfish corporate type who never visited family. That you resented her kids and wanted nothing to do with them." The character assassination hurt almost as much as the theft. While I'd been busy with work and health issues, I'd always sent birthday and Christmas gifts to my nieces and nephew. I'd attended school plays and recitals whenever I could. To hear that Amber had been painting me as some kind of heartless aunt was deeply painful. By the end of the day, I had a comprehensive plan in place. Diana would file the eviction papers the next morning. I had documented all the missing items and their approximate values. I had statements from Kevin about the fraudulent rent collection. I had printed screenshots of Amber's luxury vacation posts that contradicted her financial hardship claims. I felt prepared for whatever came next, though I knew the family fallout would be significant. What I didn't anticipate was just how low Amber would go to maintain her position. The next day, I returned to the house, armed with my legal knowledge and documentation. I'd decided to give Amber one last chance to resolve this amicably before serving the formal eviction notice. I found her in the kitchen making lunch for Emily, her youngest. When she saw me, her demeanor had completely changed from our previous confrontations. Gone was the defensive, entitled attitude, replaced with a contrite, tearful expression. "Melissa," she said softly after sending Emily to watch TV in the living room, "I've been thinking about everything. You're right. I should have asked you directly. I was desperate and ashamed." She wiped away tears that seemed genuinely emotional. The divorce was so much harder than I let on. Ryan was. He was abusive toward the end, verbally and sometimes physically. I just needed to get the kids somewhere safe, somewhere familiar. My resolve wavered slightly. This was the sister I remembered, vulnerable and open, not the calculating woman who had been trying to steal my house. "Why didn't you just tell me that?" I asked. "I would have helped you find a solution." "I was embarrassed," she admitted. "Everyone thought we had the perfect marriage, and then to lose my job on top of everything, it felt like my whole life was falling apart." Mom suggested the house, and it seemed like an easy temporary fix. For the next hour, we talked more openly than we had in years. Amber shared details about her failing marriage I'd never known. I told her more about my health struggles. We reminisced about childhood summers spent with Grandma Eleanor in this very house, laughing at old memories of catching fireflies in the backyard and making cookies in the vintage kitchen. "I know I have to move out," Amber finally said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "I understand this is your house, and I had no right to move in without permission. I just need a little time to find a new place and get the kids settled, maybe 30 days, and I promise I'll pay you back for the rent I collected from Kevin and try to track down some of Grandma's things I sold." It seemed reasonable. More than reasonable, actually. I felt a wave of relief that we might resolve this without further damage to our relationship or traumatizing the children. "I could even help with the first and last month's rent on a new place," I offered, wanting to find a middle ground. "I know it's tough out there with 3 kids." Amber's eyes filled with tears again. "You'd do that? Even after everything?" "You're still my sister," I said, feeling the tension of the past few days finally starting to dissipate. "And those kids are still my nieces and nephew." We made plans for an orderly transition. Amber would start apartment hunting immediately. I would help financially to ensure the children had a stable new home. She promised to return what she could of Grandma's possessions and repay me for the rest over time. By the time we finished talking, I felt cautiously optimistic. This was the sister I remembered, the one I'd shared secrets with in our bunk beds all those years ago. Maybe we could salvage our relationship after all. I returned to my hotel feeling lighter than I had in days. I called Diana to let her know we might not need to proceed with the formal eviction after all, though I asked her to keep the paperwork ready just in case. Around 9 p.m. that night, my phone rang. It was Nancy, the elderly neighbor from across the street who had initially told me how long Amber had been living in the house. "Melissa," she said, her voice concerned. "I thought you should know there's a lot of activity at the house right now. I can see people carrying things out to a van. Looks like larger items? Furniture, maybe?" My stomach dropped. "Thank you, Nancy. I'll head over right away." I rushed back to the house to find Amber and Kevin hurriedly loading Grandma's antique dining table into a van. 2 other pieces I hadn't even realized were missing from the attic were already inside, a valuable Art Deco mirror and the rocking chair that had been in our family for generations. "What are you doing?" I demanded, blocking the driveway with my car. Amber froze, then recovered quickly. "Just moving some things to make space. We talked about this, remember?" "No, we didn't talk about you taking more of my property in the middle of the night," I said, pulling out my phone to document what was happening. Kevin at least had the decency to look ashamed, quietly stepping away from the van and giving Amber a questioning look. Before Amber could come up with another lie, her phone rang. She answered it without thinking, putting it on speaker out of habit. "Did you get the valuable stuff out yet?" My mother's voice came through clearly. "Melissa's such a pushover. She'll never follow through on the eviction. We just need to wait her out a little longer, and she'll eventually give up and go back to Seattle." Amber's face drained of color as she realized I'd heard every word. She quickly ended the call, but the damage was done. Our entire reconciliation had been nothing but a calculated performance to buy time for more theft and deception. "You need to leave. Now." My voice was ice cold. "I'm calling the police if that van isn't empty and off my property in 5 minutes." The look Amber gave me was pure venom, all pretense gone. "You think you're so much better than everyone, don't you? Miss Perfect with her fancy job and Grandma's favorite. You've always had everything handed to you." The irony was staggering. Here she was, literally in the process of stealing from me, accusing me of having things handed to me. I stood my ground as they unloaded the furniture. Once the van was gone, I changed all the locks immediately, thankful I'd had the foresight to have new ones made after discovering the situation. Later that night, while Amber and the children were staying with a friend according to a text she reluctantly sent me, I searched the house more thoroughly. In a hidden compartment of Amber's closet, I found printouts of emails between her and a lawyer discussing adverse possession laws in Oregon. There were highlighted sections about how occupying a property openly for a certain period could potentially lead to legal claims. Even more disturbing, I found notes about how to claim squatters' rights and fight eviction proceedings. She had been planning all along to try to legally take my house from me, using her children as sympathy pawns in the process. Our emotional reconciliation earlier that day had been nothing but a calculated performance to buy time. I realized then that this situation had moved far beyond a family misunderstanding. My sister was actively trying to steal my inheritance, and my mother was helping her do it. There would be no peaceful resolution, no return to sisterly affection. I needed to protect myself and what was legally mine. The next morning, I called my brother Daniel, who lived in Tacoma, Washington. At 36, he'd always tried to stay neutral in family conflicts. We weren't particularly close, but I hoped he might be able to help mediate the increasingly toxic situation. "This is getting out of hand," I told him after explaining everything that had happened. "Could you come down to Portland? Maybe we could have a family meeting with Mom and Amber, try to resolve this rationally." Daniel was silent for a moment. "That does sound serious. Yeah, I can drive down tomorrow. Have you talked to Mom about all this?" "She's been helping Amber behind my back," I explained. But maybe with you there as a neutral party, we can find some solution that doesn't end with lawyers and restraining orders." He agreed to come, and we set up a meeting at our mother's house for the following evening. I was nervous but hopeful that with Daniel present, we might be able to have a reasonable conversation. The next evening, we all gathered in our mother's living room. Mom sat rigidly in her favorite armchair, her disapproval radiating like a physical force. Amber perched on the couch, playing the victim with downcast eyes and occasional sniffles. Daniel sat awkwardly in a dining chair he'd pulled in, clearly uncomfortable with the tension. I remained standing, too anxious to sit. "I called this meeting because I'm hoping we can resolve this situation as a family," I began. "What's happened over the past months has damaged my trust, but I still want to find a solution that works for everyone, especially the children." Mom immediately went on the offensive. "There wouldn't be a situation if you weren't being so selfish, Melissa. Your sister has 3 children to think about. What do you need a second house for?" "It's not about needing a second house," I tried to explain calmly. "It's about respecting my property and being honest." Amber moved in without asking, sold family heirlooms, collected rent illegally, and then tried to establish squatters' rights to take legal ownership. "That's ridiculous," Mom scoffed. "She just needed a place to stay during a difficult time. You're making it sound so calculated." I pulled out the legal documents I'd found in Amber's closet. "Then how do you explain these? Highlighted sections on adverse possession laws? Notes about tenant rights after 90 days of occupancy? This wasn't an impulsive decision to crash at my place. This was a planned attempt to take my house." Mom and Amber exchanged a look that confirmed everything. Daniel picked up one of the documents, reading it with a deepening frown. "Daniel, I appealed to my brother. You can see this isn't just about family helping family. This was deliberate deception." To my surprise, Daniel didn't look as shocked as I expected. "Well," he said slowly, setting down the paper, "Grandma's will did create a lot of resentment. Maybe if the property had been split more fairly between all of us." I stared at him in disbelief. "Are you serious right now? You're justifying theft and fraud because you're also bitter about Grandma's will?" Daniel had the grace to look slightly ashamed. "I'm not justifying anything. I'm just saying I understand where Amber's coming from. And honestly, Melissa, you've always been the golden child. Good grades, successful career, Grandma's favorite. Some of us haven't had it so easy." That's when the truth clicked into place. "She promised you something too, didn't she?" I asked quietly. "What was it, Daniel? What did Amber offer you if she got the house?" His silence was answer enough, but Amber couldn't resist the opportunity to twist the knife. "I told him he could use it as a vacation property whenever he wanted, which is more than you ever offered." "Because it's my house!" I exclaimed, feeling like I was taking crazy pills. "Grandma left it to Me, not to all of us collectively." "Your grandmother should have left it to all of you equally anyway," Mom interjected bitterly. "She always did play favorites." "Is that what this is really about?" I asked, looking between the 3 of them. "Punishing me because Grandma loved me? Taking what's mine because you think it should have been yours?" "We're family," Mom said, as if that explained and excused everything. "Family shares." "Family doesn't lie and steal from each other," I countered. "Family doesn't move into someone's house without permission, sell their possessions, or try to claim legal ownership through squatters' rights." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Look, no one's saying what Amber did was right, but actually, it sounds like that's exactly what you're saying," I interrupted. "You're all justifying theft and fraud because you're jealous of my inheritance." The conversation devolved from there. I revealed that I knew Mom had given Amber the lockbox code and helped her move in while I was undergoing medical treatment. Mom didn't even deny it, simply stating that someone needed to use the house while I was focused on my health. The final surprise came from an unexpected source. Daniel's wife, Jessica, had come along but had been quietly sitting in the kitchen, staying out of the family drama. She walked into the living room during our argument, looking troubled. "I can't listen to this anymore," she said. "Amber tried to sell me your grandmother's jewelry last month, Melissa. She said you'd given it to her, but it felt wrong, so I declined. I should have told you immediately, and I'm sorry I didn't." The look of betrayal on Daniel's face suggested this was news to him too. The revelation caused another explosion of accusations and denials. Amber claimed Jessica was lying. Mom accused Jessica of trying to create more family discord. Daniel sat in stunned silence, clearly processing his wife's words. By the end of the evening, it was clear no resolution would come from this meeting. My family had effectively split into factions. Amber and Mom on one side, me on the other, with Daniel caught uncomfortably in the middle and now dealing with his own marital tension. As I was leaving, Mom delivered the final blow. If you go through with evicting your sister, you can forget you have a family at all. Choose wisely, Melissa. It wasn't a choice at all. They had already shown me exactly what kind of family they were. The failed family meeting left me with no doubts about how to proceed. The next morning, I called Diana and asked her to move forward with the formal eviction process and to explore options for expediting it due to the theft of property. Given the evidence of fraud and theft, Diana explained, we have grounds to request an accelerated eviction timeline. The unauthorized rental of the garage apartment and sale of your possessions constitutes criminal activity on the property, which can be grounds for faster action. While Diana handled the legal paperwork, I focused on documenting everything. I took extensive photos of the house in its current condition, noting damage to walls, floors, and fixtures. I created a detailed inventory of all missing items with approximate values, using photos from before the renovation as evidence of what had been there. I also contacted the school where Amber had enrolled the children, explaining the property ownership situation and requesting they update their records with Amber's actual address. The school administrator seemed unsurprised, mentioning they'd had some concerns about the enrollment documentation, which had listed Amber as Amber Harper, property owner rather than just a resident. While searching the house for more missing items, I discovered a hidden cache in the attic. Several pieces of Grandma's jewelry and silver that Amber hadn't yet managed to sell, along with some important family documents. I secured these items in a safe deposit box at a local bank, away from Amber's reach. With Diana's guidance, I arranged for a locksmith to change all the locks again, this time with a police officer present for a civil standby to ensure there was no disturbance. Amber was furious but couldn't do anything with law enforcement present. "You can't just throw us out on the street," she shouted as the locksmith worked. "We have rights." "You have 30 days to find new accommodation," I responded calmly, handing her the formal eviction notice Diana had prepared. "I've documented all the missing items. You can either return them or repay their value." "Good luck proving any of that," she sneered. The officer, who had remained professionally neutral throughout the exchange, stepped forward. "Ma'am, I should inform you that selling property that doesn't belong to you can be considered theft. If your sister chooses to file a police report, this could become a criminal matter." That seemed to give Amber pause, though her glare at me promised this wasn't over. Later that evening, after Amber had left with the children to stay with a friend, I was startled by the sound of breaking glass. Rushing downstairs, I discovered someone had thrown a rock through the living room window. Though I couldn't prove it was Amber or Kevin, the timing seemed far too coincidental. I called the police again, who took a report and advised me to install security cameras. The next day, I had a complete security system installed, with cameras covering all entrances and motion-activated lights around the perimeter. That night, the cameras captured Amber and Kevin attempting to enter the house using what looked like a copied key. When it didn't work due to the changed locks, they tried to force open a back window. The alarm sounded, they fled, and I had the entire incident on video. I immediately sent the footage to Diana and filed another police report. The next morning, my mother showed up, furious about the police reports and security footage. She created a scene on the front lawn, yelling loud enough for neighbors to hear about how I was making my own sister and her children homeless. For the first time in my life, I stood my ground with my mother. "Mom, Amber has been stealing from me and trying to illegally take my house. She's had 4 months to find alternative arrangements, but chose to try to scam me instead. This isn't about family anymore. This is about right and wrong. I raised you better than this," she spat. "Your grandmother would be ashamed." "No," I said quietly but firmly. "Grandma would be ashamed of how you and Amber have behaved. She valued honesty and respect for others' property. That's why she left the house to me in the first place." Mom's face contorted with anger, but something in my calm certainty must have reached her because she suddenly deflated. "You've always thought you were better than us," she said, but the fight had gone out of her voice. "I've never thought that," I replied. "But I do expect basic honesty and respect from my family. Is that really too much to ask?" She left without answering, and I watched her drive away with a mixture of sadness and resolution. This confrontation had been decades in the making, addressing patterns of favoritism and enabling that had shaped our family dynamics for as long as I could remember. Over the next 2 weeks, the situation escalated further. Amber launched a social media campaign painting me as the villain who was making innocent children homeless. Several extended family members took her side without hearing my version of events. Others reached out privately, saying they'd always suspected Amber's stories were one-sided but had never wanted to get involved. The stress took a toll on my health. My doctor noticed elevated inflammation markers at my next appointment and adjusted my medication. The irony wasn't lost on me. I needed the rental income from the house to pay for treatments, but the fight to reclaim it was making my condition worse. Despite everything, I remained resolute. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about standing up for myself after a lifetime of being taken advantage of by my own family. 2 weeks after serving the eviction notice, we had our court date. I arrived early with Diana, my stomach in knots despite our solid case. Amber showed up with her own attorney, a harried-looking man who seemed unprepared. She'd also brought the children, clearly hoping their presence would sway the judge. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Watkins, quickly asked for the children to be removed from the courtroom. "This is not an appropriate environment for minors," she stated firmly. "Family court services can watch them in the hallway during proceedings." Once the children were settled outside, the hearing began. Diana presented our case methodically, showing documentation of my ownership, the unauthorized occupancy, the theft and sale of personal property, the fraudulent collection of rent from the garage tenant, and the attempts to establish squatters' rights. Amber's attorney tried to frame it as a family misunderstanding, emphasizing Amber's status as a single mother and recent divorcee. "Your Honor, this is a case of one sister with abundant resources refusing to help another in desperate need." Judge Watkins was unmoved. "Counselor, need does not create right. If your client needed housing assistance, there are legal channels to pursue that. Unauthorized occupancy and sale of property belonging to the legal owner is not one of them." When Amber took the stand, she turned on the tears, talking about her children's stability and how traumatic another move would be for them. "My sister has 2 homes," she said, voice breaking. "She doesn't even use this one. Is property really more important than family?" During cross-examination, Diana was relentless. "Miss Harper, did you move into your sister's house without her knowledge or permission?" "My mother said it was okay," Amber hedged. "Did your mother own the house?" "No, but did you sell items from the house that didn't belong to you?" "Just a few things I thought wouldn't be missed." "Did you collect $800 monthly rent from a tenant in the garage apartment and keep that money for yourself?" "I needed it for the children." "Did you research adverse possession laws with the intent to claim ownership of your sister's property?" "That was just research." With each question, Amber's case unraveled further. The judge's expression grew increasingly disapproving. When it was my turn to testify, I spoke plainly about the inheritance, my medical condition, the need for rental income, and the betrayal I'd felt discovering my sister's deception. "Your Honor, I would have helped Amber if she'd asked directly. I've helped her financially many times in the past. What I cannot accept is the deliberate deception, theft, and attempts to take my property through adverse possession." The judge ruled in my favor, granting the eviction with a 14-day period for Amber to vacate rather than the standard 30 days, citing the evidence of theft and unauthorized rental activity. She also advised me that I had grounds for a civil suit regarding the stolen property, though that would be a separate legal action. As we left the courtroom, Amber refused to look at me. Her children, confused and upset, clung to her while giving me wary glances. Lily, the oldest, seemed to understand more than the others, her expression a mixture of disappointment and resignation. That afternoon, I made the difficult decision to file a police report regarding the stolen property. Diana had advised me this was necessary for insurance claims and any future civil action. While I had no desire to see Amber arrested, especially given the children, I needed the formal documentation. The fallout was immediate and intense. My mother called, screaming that I was destroying the family by involving the police. Several aunts and uncles who'd sided with Amber sent scathing messages about my cruelty. Even Daniel, who had been tentatively supportive after Jessica's revelation about the jewelry, suggested I was taking things too far. The next blow came when I discovered Amber had contacted my employer, claiming I was mentally unstable and making false accusations due to paranoid delusions related to my medication. Fortunately, my boss had known me for over a decade and recognized the attempt at character assassination for what it was, but the violation felt like yet another betrayal. Through it all, I kept asking myself if a house was really worth losing my family over. But the more I reflected, the more I realized what I was actually fighting for wasn't the property itself, but the principle of respect and honesty. If my family couldn't offer me those basic courtesies, what kind of relationship did we really have? A week after the court hearing, I broke down completely while talking with Rachel. The weight of the past months came crashing down, and I sobbed until I had no tears left. I never wanted any of this, I told her. I just wanted what was rightfully mine, what Grandma intended me to have. How did it turn into this nightmare? Because you finally stood up for yourself, Rachel said gently. And some people don't like it when their doormat suddenly grows a spine. Her words resonated deeply. For years, I'd been the responsible one, the one who helped without complaint, who gave without expecting anything in return. The moment I set a boundary and demanded respect, I became the villain in my family's narrative. That night, while reviewing the security footage out of habit, I made a disturbing discovery. The camera in the living room had captured Amber going through my personal medical documents that I'd brought to show Diana. She was taking photos of my test results and treatment plans with her phone, confusion, and something like guilt crossing her face as she read about the severity of my condition. It seemed that despite all her claims, Amber truly hadn't known or believed how serious my health situation was. But instead of this information fostering understanding, the footage showed her quickly hiding the documents when she heard someone coming, her expression hardening into the now familiar mask of entitlement and resentment. Even faced with evidence of my struggle, she had chosen to continue her campaign against me. In that moment, I realized that no evidence, no explanation, no appeal to empathy would ever be enough. Some relationships couldn't be saved, no matter how much history or blood tied you together. The day Amber and her children moved out was somber and tense. I arrived early with a professional cleaning crew waiting nearby, not wanting to intrude on their departure but needing to secure the property immediately afterward. From my car, I watched as they loaded the last of their belongings into a rented moving truck. The children looked confused and unhappy. Jacob, the middle child, kept asking loud questions about why they had to leave Grandma's house. Emily, the youngest, was crying. Only Lily seemed resigned, her young face too serious for a 10-year-old. Once they drove away, I entered the house with a heavy heart. The damage was worse than I'd anticipated. Walls had holes punched in them. Cabinet doors in the kitchen hung from broken hinges. The beautiful hardwood floors I'd had refinished were scratched and stained. It looked like a deliberate effort to devalue the property I'd worked so hard to restore. The cleaning crew estimated it would take at least a week to make the place habitable again. The contractor I called to assess the damage quoted nearly $23,000 for repairs. I documented everything meticulously for insurance and the potential civil suit Diana had recommended. A week after the move-out, I received an unexpected visitor at the house where I was overseeing repairs. Lily stood on the porch, nervously shifting from foot to foot, a small box clutched in her hands. "Aunt Melissa?" she said when I opened the door. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" I invited her in, concerned about how she'd gotten there. "Does your mom know you're here?" She shook her head. "I told her I was going to my friend's house down the street. But I wanted to give you this." She handed me the small box. Inside was Grandma Eleanor's gold locket, one of the missing items I'd documented. The delicate, heart-shaped pendant contained tiny photos of my grandfather and grandmother as young adults. "I took it before Mom could sell it," Lily admitted. "I remembered how you told me once that Grandma Eleanor wanted you to have it." Tears filled my eyes as I held the precious keepsake. "Thank you, Lily. This means more to me than you can understand." We sat on the front steps, and Lily opened up about the past months. She'd known something wasn't right about living in the house, but had been told repeatedly that I was the selfish one who didn't care about family. Mom kept saying you were rich and mean and didn't care if we had nowhere to live, Lily said. But then I heard her talking to Grandma Patricia about the vacation they took with the money from selling your stuff, and it didn't make sense. My heart broke for this child, wise beyond her years, caught in adult conflicts she shouldn't have had to navigate. Lily, no matter what happens between your mom and me, I want you to know that I love you and your brother and sister very much. Are you really sick? She asked suddenly. I heard Mom telling Kevin you were making it up for attention. I gently explained my autoimmune condition in terms she could understand, without vilifying her mother further. Lily listened solemnly, then spontaneously hugged me. I'm sorry we broke your house, she whispered. That simple, sincere apology from a child did more to heal my heart than any court victory. After careful consideration, I decided against pursuing the civil lawsuit for the stolen items. While the financial loss was significant, I couldn't bear the thought of putting the children through more trauma. Instead, I focused on moving forward, maintaining firm boundaries with Amber and my mother, while leaving the door open for a relationship with my nieces and nephew. My brother Daniel visited a month after the eviction, offering to help with some of the repairs. It was an olive branch of sorts, an acknowledgement that he'd been wrong to support Amber's scheme. Jessica made me realize how messed up this whole situation was, he admitted as we replaced damaged drywall in what had been the children's bedroom. And seeing the house now, Amber really did a number on it. It's just stuff, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. It can be fixed. Can our family? He asked quietly. I didn't have an easy answer for that. I think it depends on whether everyone wants it to be fixed. Real reconciliation requires honesty and respect. I'm open to that if Mom and Amber ever are. 6 months after the eviction, I finally accomplished my original goal. The house was fully repaired, beautifully staged, and rented to a lovely family of 4 who signed a 2-year lease. The income would indeed help with my medical expenses, just as I'd planned. Remarkably, around the 8-month mark, I received a letter from Amber. Unlike her previous communications full of accusations and entitlement, this one seemed genuinely reflective. I've been in therapy, she wrote. Part of my recovery is making amends for harm I've caused. I'm not asking for forgiveness yet, but I want you to know I recognize what I did was wrong. The divorce and financial stress weren't excuses for how I treated you and your property. I'm working on becoming someone my children can be proud of. While I was cautiously encouraged by her words, I maintained my boundaries. Actions would need to follow these initial steps toward accountability before any real reconciliation could begin. In the meantime, I established college funds for Lily, Jacob, and Emily, accessible when they turned 18. Whatever happened between their mother and me, I wanted them to have opportunities for their futures. I arranged with Daniel and Jessica to facilitate supervised visits with the children, maintaining that connection while keeping a healthy distance from toxic family dynamics. Looking back on that Tuesday when I first discovered Amber in my house, I realize it marked the beginning of both an ending and a beginning. I lost the idealized version of my family I'd clung to despite years of evidence to the contrary. But I gained something perhaps more valuable, the strength to stand up for myself, to set boundaries, and to recognize that real love doesn't take advantage or deceive. The house in Portland still stands, beautifully restored and serving its purpose, but the real renovation happened within me. Sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't property or possessions, but the courage to protect what's rightfully yours, even when those trying to take it from you are the people who should have been protecting it alongside you. If my story resonates with you, I hope it gives you courage to stand up for yourself when needed. Family should be about love and support, not exploitation. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if this story helped you feel less alone in your own family struggles. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the family we choose is more supportive than the family we're born into. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.